When it comes to social media and the implications for the younger generation, parents are always worried about screen time and what social media will do to our kids. And Chris, you've put together some research here for an article that says much the opposite of what parents would actually think is happening with our kids.
That's absolutely right. I mean, normally all research that has been done previously pretty much has suggested that social media makes kids insecure, depressed, think of any negative emotion you possibly can. And that's what it does because, and for obvious reasons, you'd think, bullying, all kinds of things that flow through the gorgeous river of social media. But I found some new research this week from the University of Oxford, no less, bless it. I went to the other place, Cambridge, but I think Oxford's actually better. And these researchers claim they talked to 12,000 UK teens, and they discovered that there was absolutely no problem with social media in terms of its effects on their happiness. Apparently, the kids, when they talk about their happiness, still have the very same reasons for either being happy or unhappy, and that's family, friends, and what happens at school. Social media, these researchers calculate, only negatively affects by 0.25% of their happiness. So, not really that bad if it's only affecting 0.25% of your happiness. I mean, frankly, Starbucks affects 0.25% of my happiness every morning. So you'd think it's not a great effect, but it does go counter to pretty much all the prevailing research that suggests less screen time. These researchers actually said that the whole idea of worrying about screen time, of parents particularly worrying about screen time, and Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, of course, worrying about screen time, is that it's total nonsense and we should stop even referring to screen time because it's not a problem.
Well, that's actually the best news I've heard in a while, Chris, because it's something that, as a mom of three, I worry about a lot. And, there's so many apps that are out there and so many articles that say you should use these apps that limit your kids' screen time and things like that. But this is really saying the opposite.
This is really saying the opposite. And I was as astonished as you because I worry about my own screen time. Whenever I get my little Apple notification on a Sunday morning, it's almost like going to church, where Apple wants to tell me how bad a boy I've been last week. And the good news is when I'm 17% down on my screen time from the previous week, but when it wants to give me bad news, it doesn't even compare it to the previous week. It just says to me, you were on your phone for 3 hours a day last week. It doesn't even say that's 100% worse than last week. It just tells you you're being bad. So, I guess in history, one thing that we ought to learn is that, yes, we'd like to help our kids, but when it comes down to it, it's the adults who need most help. And it could be, I was in a restaurant the other night where I saw parents and one child. The parents were in their, I would say, late 50s, and they were both on their phones, and the child had a textbook. And there was almost something sort of charming about that. But no, these researchers claimed that previous research was done on extremely small samples and simply wasn't statistically significant. Whereas they're looking at a sample of 12,000 and they're saying, you know what? These kids are it could be that, I'm guessing here, because of course every piece of research says more research is needed. But I'm guessing in this case, the kids understand what social media is at a very early age and therefore learn to deal with it more quickly than perhaps those who didn't grow up with it from the very beginning and have had to come to terms with it. That's just a guess. I'm not a scientist, and I definitely never will be.
Well, me neither, Chris. But I would say, what do you think about this? That it seems maybe kids, if they were being bullied, let's say at school, and they would go home and that was it. But now they have their world is expanded because of social media, so they can connect with kids that might be more like them that live in a different city or state. Do you think that's part of it?
I think again, these researchers didn't analyze that. They were focusing much more on the kids' actual happiness, how they talked about their happiness and what affected that happiness. But it's certainly possible that, the positives of social media, of course, are that you can find ways to connect with people who have similar experiences to you, similar emotions to you. Of course, you have to wade through all the other stuff. And it may be that, younger kids now are much smarter at how they can manipulate social media in order to control it for themselves.
Yeah, social media, it really is a fascinating thing. But it's really interesting to see that this research is contrary to what we've been thinking for a long time, Chris.
Absolutely.
Well, we thank you for your report on this, and Chris's full article can be found on ZDNet.